guys too. He's an amazing person. And I have had the privilege of meeting so many amazing people, so I would like to thank you for this opportunity. And I got to spend actually my first true week with Rain. I guess it was right after a week with a guy named Russ Crowley in Asia. And he said, I want to give you some advice. I said, okay, will you listen to me? And I said, yes. And he said, I really need you to talk about yourself when you're on stage. I know you don't want to, but it will help. And I said, well, I'm used to talking about products. And he said, I know, but in this business, I need you to tell a little bit about yourself and why you're here. And it actually, each time I got a little bit more comfortable. And so I'm going to start by telling a little bit about why I went into science, why I've done what I've done, and how it can help all of us. So my journey as a kid was growing up on a farm, and during the days, pesticide planes would fly over and they would come down on the farm. I grew up in a small town. It was a great learning experience, great childhood. We had all kinds of farms. We also had tobacco. In Kentucky, which is one of the areas where our farms were, a lot of people back then grew tobacco. It was a pretty good crop. So what comes with tobacco? Carcinogens. What comes with pesticide? Carcinogens. Most of my family has either had cancer, in fact almost everyone, or died of cancer. I first experienced cancer when I was about 23 years old. I was pregnant with twins, and so this story is going to go right back to the seed story. I was pregnant with twins. What happens the minute that a child is conceived? Those cells are usually 99% of the time about as healthy as they get. But once they start multiplying, growing, it can change, right? So at first everything's fine. That's why you take the pregnancy test, it shows positive. But then a lot of times in the first trimester, people will lose a pregnancy. This will relate, and we're going to talk about in a second, why seed technology, the seed, before it's even growing, is your strongest science. It's when everything's going great. It's when everything's pure. It's before the toxins and the stress and the inflammation hit and unlock what's called an epigenetic, right? Because a lot of my life I've spent on genetics, working on human monoclonal antibodies that we would mix with murine, working on the science behind products. And when I've done that, I have always gone back to the fact that your technology, your genetics that have to do with human beings is very, very similar to the same stem cell technology and cell technology that are in plants. So here I am at the age of getting ready to turn 24, pregnant with twins, and all of a sudden, one of the twins, instead of developing into healthy cells around 3 months, developed into cancerous cells inside my body. So here were my options, and I was really too young and naive to completely understand this, but my options were to have what's called a medical abortion, which is not a regular abortion, but because if I chose to carry the pregnancy, it meant that the cancer was going to metastasize throughout my body during the pregnancy. But because the twins were not identical twins, the other option was carry the one twin, and then the other twin, I would undergo a procedure, and I would have to have chemotherapy and radiation. That child was no longer a child. That child was not going to be healthy. I had about a 1% chance of having my oldest son, whose name is Duquesne, and I chose that second option. I ended up having Duquesne. Afterwards, I had a brain tumor and a spinal tumor, and I had cancer basically throughout my body. So when people ask me, was this always your planned journey? Here's my answer, no. I thought that I was going to spend a lot of my life teaching, doing art, doing really fun things. I actually used to have a very vivid imagination. I think I still do, which is one of the things that has helped me with science. So when all of this happened, I became even more focused on science. Before that, I had been a graduate assistant in graduate school. I had been accepted into a doctoral program. I was focused on psychology of children, and then the neurology of children, and neurotransmissions of the brain. But after that, I started becoming more focused on science. So a lot of my science background, where I taught at Johns Hopkins, or I went into the MIT and Harvard labs at Biogen IDEC, that was postdoc. And that was because at that point, I really wanted to understand, why do we get sick? How do we change it? How do we fix it? And that journey has led me to RAIN. I feel like the first half of my career was spent on, as I told you guys last night, when people get sick, how do we fix it? And we all need that, right? We need science to continue. When people are sick, how do you fix that? But what really came about through all of this was a very strong understanding of, how do we preserve the cells that we have? How do we clean them? How do we not age? Or how do we reverse aging so that we can stay young, healthy, and prosperous? So, when you talk about seed science, I don't think the company completely understood, and somehow they believed in me, but I don't think they understood when they were talking about seed science how much truly I connected with that, not just as a scientist, but personally, because I do understand genetics. I've had the luxury of working with genetics and working with some of your top companies like Biogen IDEC and Alexion, UCB, BMS, I can go on and on. Great leadership and great companies. But I also personally have led a journey where I've studied scientifically on what happens as soon as something is conceived. So today, I want to talk about seed science, and we're going to go into the different products that are in Soul and Core. But I first want to start with telling you guys a story about a bucket. How many of you guys are a child of, and you have parents? All do? How many of you guys have children? Do you know the bucket story? If you have a bucket and you continuously give away everything in your bucket and you don't save anything in the bucket for yourself, you don't have anything to give away anymore. So today, we're going to talk about each of you and the science that are in your bodies so that you can at first preserve yourselves and take care of yourselves, so you can go out there for RAIN as a personal testimony and help your whole team and help more and more people, because you will individually be able to touch more people than a doctor in his lifetime will ever be able to do. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm having a little bit of problems with my slides, but it's okay. I'll just do it. You know. So let's start with the World Health Congress. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. The World Health Congress came out in 2014 and especially 2015 and talked about why we're having so many health problems. And they said basically they were 99% certain, and that's 99%, and just so you guys know in research, no one says 99%. 99% certain environmental toxins were linked to the cause of most major health issues. It was in U.S. World Report, National Geographic, and the United States government made the announcement through a lady named Elizabeth Grossman. Elizabeth Grossman stated that the United States was behind this report as well. Again, it's the World Health Congress. It's not the United States. It's all countries coming together to try to figure out what is going on in the world we're living in. And they realized, like I said last night, we're toxic. Our cells are toxic. So the minute you're conceived, you're in the body. What happens if the minute you're conceived, the mother's toxic? What happens if you know 30% of your toxins are passed on to your child, and that mother or that father has been exposed to toxins? That cell, while it's duplicating, immediately is undergoing stress, undergoing inflammation. It's not protected completely because the genetics are growing your cells are growing very, very quickly, right? That's why when kids get leukemia, it's very hard because it's growing very, very fast. When an older person gets cancer, guess what? It's not as bad. Do you want to know why? Your cells aren't growing as fast. They're growing slower. But when you're young, they're growing very fast. You're exposed to all this stress, all these toxins, and things can go wrong because it can unlock an epigenetic, turn on the engine of the car. Once that engine is turned on, your inflammation is turned on, the disease is turned on, and you've got to turn it off. And it's almost impossible, especially when you're in someone's stomach. And that's why I had a couple of questions when when I was in Asia, people asked me, if I'm pregnant, can I take this? And I said, this is a food compressed, a seed compressed, right? At its most scientific, developed, pure time, where the mechanism of action of those ingredients, it's the purest time. Why would you not want to take products when you know these products are going to be detoxing the cell and putting nutrients in the cell? But I said, as a disclaimer, that's a conversation you always want to have with your doctor. But this is not a vitamin that you're taking when you're taking these packets. This is a nutrient that's going into your cells, and it is detoxing those cells so they can work better and hopefully turn off the inflammation, turn off the car, so that if there is a disease and you have what's called an inflammatory cascade, that stops. And just so you guys know, a lot of these stem cell products that are out there, biotech products and things that cost $400,000, $800,000 a year, I'm not against them. I've worked on many of them, and they're very good for people. But a lot of these, that's what they do. They're targeted. They go into the body. They're targeted to communicate with your cells and to say, like I said last night, look at me. You want to look like me and be healthy, and then what happens? They communicate, and the sick cells die. It's called targeted cell death. It's called apoptosis. And guess what else causes targeted cell death and apoptosis? The seed of the black cumin seed, the seed of black raspberry. Very, very powerful, by the way. There's a research article that says 33.3% if you use black cumin seed oils after you take the seed and the oil out of the seed. So it's even better if you already just have the seed compressed. And then you take also the black cumin with the raspberry, 33.3% higher efficacy when you have those two products, and very targeted cell death. And also, guess what else it says? It also offers protection to the cell. So I know one of the questions is, how can it do both? Well, how does a seed grow into a plant that then produces a flower, that produces fruit? Because seeds can do a lot of things. They can cause things to die that are bad, and they can cause things that are good to live. And that's what the seeds in the soul and core do. So we're going to go back to what we talked about last night. You guys are each, for me, just indulge me for a second, think of your bodies as a city, and think of this city as a city where you're the mayor and you get to decide what to do. you as the mayor can't help your city until you help yourself. So today, that's again why we're going to talk about our own bodies. When you're in your city and you're the mayor, like I talked about yesterday, you have bad cells that move in. In the city, you've got a gang member that moves in, right? That gang member moves in, it's a bad cell. What caused that gang member to move in? A number of things. Anything, right? In your bodies, what causes it to happen, like I said, is it's an inflammatory event, it's a toxin, it's a stress, it's something that comes from your phone because that's kind of, can be bad energy, right? I mean, there's a lot of things. So what happens is that bad cell moves in, or that gang member moves in, and then like I said yesterday, the communication begins. When I want to talk about it from a receptor or scientific standpoint, we call them receptors on the cell. They communicate through pathways. I'm going to go back and talk about computer systems. Again, everything's on a grid, right, in your city. So just like there was a talk earlier where we talked about that things are moving towards robotics and they're moving toward intellectual, artificial intelligence, I'm going to tell you guys right now, in your bodies, those cells are talking and they're communicating like a computer system. And it's like clockwork. There's nothing you can do unless you stop the communication, which, as you discussed, is almost impossible to cut off communication, right? You've got to reverse it. So when you're the mayor of the city, something unlocks that communication between these gang members, and they start talking and they start growing. And the only way to get those gang members out is as the mayor of the city, you have to bring resources in, and you better bring the big gun. You can bring in oils, you can bring in different herbs, you can bring in different nutrients, but if you really want to attack a negative cell that is not good in your body and you want to stop an inflammatory cascade in the body, you need to bring in something strong, something compressed, something that has a mechanism of action that can stop all the negative activity going on. And again, that's what you have when you put the combination of seeds that are behind the intellectual property in core and in soul. And here's what I told someone earlier when we were sitting outside and talking. I have seen lots of companies that are on the nutraceutical side take products and water them down. And guess what? Rain doesn't do that. You have a leader that is committed to making this society better. You've got a leadership team that is committed to making sure they deliver the best products. You've got investors that understand that even though sometimes things cost a lot of money, they are needed to make this world a better place, and that's what you've got in those packages. You do not have watered down ingredients, you do not have imitation. You've got a product that was used with pediatric oncology patients to do exactly what we're talking about today. Products that were used to go in to oncology patients' bodies to clean them out and to provide the proper nutrients so they would thrive. Because guess what? If you can't get proper nutrients into a body of someone that's very sick, they just won't make it. So you have to get those in. So we are very lucky today that we have the ability to just go online or walk in somewhere without a prescription and get these products. I don't understand why people wait until they're in a nursing home to want to spend money on health care. Do you know that Paul would probably know the statistic better, Byron, you might know, I'm not sure. I think it's 65%, I will get you the numbers, I'm a number person. 65% I think of an average person's wealth is spent in a nursing home. Do you guys know the number on healthcare? It's dramatic. So here are these people, they wait their whole life, and then they save all this money, and they spend it in a nursing home, dying with bad, because they're not doing well. why wouldn't we as individuals, and again, for ourselves, take an initiative where we take the time to feed our bodies full of the proper seeds, proper nutrients, so that the cells inside of us will detox and they will have the proper nutrients. We can, and we are, and I think that's why we're all in this room. When you do that, I know you're asking, well, how do you guys know that it's the right seeds? How do you know exactly what the mechanism of action is? How do you know the bioavailability? How do you know what's called steady state? Steady state, by the way, means when you take the ingredients, how long does it stay in the system and work in the cells? Peak plasma level, and I'm not going to get too much into science, but peak plasma level means when is that product at its peak? When does it work the best? The answer to that is there's tons of research that went into the products. There's additional research that we're doing right now so that we can show you even more data. But I will tell you this from the research that I have done on the different products that are in core and seed, that there is a time component. And what I mean by that is there is a time that it's at its optimal and then it lasts in your system, and there is a dose component. What we know is those 2 packets are enough for a normal individual, an average person, to achieve what needs to happen on a daily basis for cleaning out the system and detoxing, and then also replenishing the system. But when I say average person, I want you guys to know this. When someone has a disease and there's an inflammation and a cascade event in the body with these cells, and that means they're all communicating, they're all growing, it's not the same. So while someone is healthy and they get their daily nutrients from a package of core and soul, someone that is sick, they need more of a product. However, when you're a company, you have to be very, very careful, and even me on the science side, you have to be very, very careful what you tell people to do, right? So the best thing you tell people is, this is what a normal person takes on a daily basis, and these are the ingredients that provide them with the nutrients that their cells need. I had lots of people in Asia tell me that they knew people that had cancer, actually lots of doctors, because we had what were called doctor roundtables in almost every country. And they told me that they had friends that had cancer or multiple sclerosis or diabetes that would take a packet of Soul and Core every 3 to 4 hours. That absolutely made sense to me as a scientist, because if you look at the bioavailability of black cumin seed in its most compressed form, and at the same dosing which is put into a packet of Core and Soul, the research behind that is showing that it's lasting about an average of 4 to 6 hours. Doesn't mean that if you don't have that in your system's gonna go crazy, right? It just means if your body's attacking something, the research behind black cumin seed is showing that you probably need to take it on an intermediate basis. You know, you need to take it throughout the day. However, we are going to do research on those particular packets so that we know more information. And as a company, even on the science side, even on the research side, we don't want to make claims. We do not want to take this product as a pharmaceutical product, because guess why? You're limiting the ability of a product to be able to be rolled out to the masses. You're limiting the ability of a product to get into the hands of all these people in the world that are toxic. And when I say all these people in the world, if the data is being shown by the World Health Congress that it's billions and trillions of dollars that we're going to have to spend on detoxification, and if they know and they're stating that about 80% of our health problems are impacted by that, who needs these products? We all do. You know, I'm in Asia and I'm looking at the pollution and I'm talking to them about pollution, and they're talking about how they have such a horrible issue with it, and I'm sitting there and thinking, and we don't in the United States? We do. And then they made the comment, a couple of people at one of our discussions, well, you guys have more options because you have more money, so you have more organic food. And do you know what I said? I don't care if you have organic food. If you have toxic land, toxic air, toxic water, that's not, if toxic things produce something that's organic, it's in there, right? Because it's been growing and it's out there. And another way I said this is, if you go and you buy a fish and it's fresh and you cook it, and I'm giving you fresh fish for dinner, let's eat it, but it came out of the sewage. Do you want it? So that's what we're dealing with. It doesn't mean we need to be depressed. It doesn't mean we need to think, what are we going to do? We have solutions. I literally, in everything I've done in my life, and I'm sure you guys are the same way, it's easy to get down, but guess what? There's always a solution. Things are not horrible. And we are very, very fortunate. RAIN is based out of the United States. The leadership team that everyone else is begging to see, they're right here. The investors are here. You have a company that believes in what they're doing and they're producing it. And it's almost like we just got handed the keys to a Lamborghini. As my son Crowder would say, I want a Lamborghini. Guess what? This is better than a Lamborghini, because guess what? If you have a Lamborghini and you don't have your health, I've been there. Let me just tell you this because I want you guys to know. You don't care about the Lamborghini. Mm-hmm. I have had the luxury in my life of being able to have things. When you're sick, it does not matter. And I learned that lesson at a very young age. And I hope you guys don't have to learn those lessons. I imagine a lot of you have had to in some format, or you have people you love that have. So the great thing about this is a product that absolutely will help you get rid of a bad cell because of the ingredients in it. And RAIN doesn't have to make a claim that their product is killing cancer. Guess why? They don't need to, because I am going to have available, and not me, the Department of Clinical Science is going to have available to people all the research articles that show that those ingredients do the better. It's the information that RAIN did not even produce. RAIN is going to produce information, but it's articles that are published on PubMed and NIH's website. I have access to it, I'm a researcher, so guess what? I pulled them off, I'm reading through all of them, I've got some back there today. The leadership team is reviewing everything and legal to see what we can make sure that we can get out to everyone. But we also have the luxury of having a scientific advisory board, which is funded as an outside source by RAIN and the foundation. And that scientific advisory board, if you are a doctorate level scientist, a healthcare provider, if you're a nutritionist or an expert in the field, we will be having open forum discussions, and we will be producing articles that everyone is going to be able to come and pull off the site, regardless.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah. I got to tell you again, I could brag about every single member of this executive team. I do feel like I'm home. They have the values and morals and ethics that I like. They're strong, they're good. It's a strong team. But Dan Scarpino's brilliant. I've worked at Pfizer, Biogen, all those companies. He had tons of money. Dan Scarpino is able to take a concept and then roll it out in a way that is very easy for everyone to see. So right now what he's working on is making sure when you go to the search bar, if you put in, for example, black cumin seed, diabetes, all the articles that we're gathering and that we have will come out so that you have them.
Wow.
Yeah, black cumin, it's brilliant. It's not my idea, I mean it's his. Then if you go and you say diabetes, it will also show you all the different seeds and the different articles, so it'll be two different things you can search. So for example, people ask me another question, what about depression? What about hormone health? You'll be able to see that too. A lot of the articles, there's what are called abstract articles, white papers. Some of them that we have back there have a combination of about 700 articles in one, compressed. One of the articles is fantastic. It addresses almost every type of cancer and what black cumin seed does to the cancer. It does go into the scientific abstracts. So one of the things that we're going to do also is every time we have an article, if the sales teams and Ryan say, Christina, we need a summary on that article, make it brief, simplify it, just like you did when you were on stage. I hope I'm simplifying. I hope I'm doing that a little bit.
Yeah, great.
So then I'll do whatever you guys need, because we all have gifts, right? I really am not more intelligent than anyone else. In fact, I would never have even been in the labs of Harvard or MIT or taught at Johns Hopkins if it wasn't for the fact that I worked for companies and I had this passion inside of needing answers because of what happened to me personally. When you lose a child and then you have cancer, it kind of motivates you. You have a choice. You can either be depressed and get upset, or you can get up and say, what am I going to do? And when you start realizing, look, I don't know how many days I have left. I don't know what's going to happen. Let me make the most of each day. It changes your life. It was a gift. It's like most bad experiences in our lives. It's a gift if you get through it. So again, let's go back to our own cities. We have bad cells. We have things going on we don't even know about. It's called silent killers. And I know you guys have probably heard this from doctors, but we all have silent killers. High blood pressure, cholesterol, cardiovascular. Why don't we know it's cancer? Why don't we know it's going on? Because guess what? Our cells are so smart. If they don't want us to know it's going on, they don't have to let us know. They're very smart. They communicate, they have their own system, and each body is different. That's why somebody can take a core and a sol and they feel horrible for 6 weeks while they're detoxing. That's why someone can take it and they don't feel anything. It's still working. It's in your body. It's doing the same thing, but your cells are handling it differently. Your personality is different than mine. Your personality is different than mine. We react differently. So I give you knowledge. You communicate back in one way. You communicate back in another way. None of us communicate the same. You guys, it's the same thing with our cells and our bodies. And I think a lot of times as scientists and doctors, knowledge can be power, and sometimes it's easy to want to seem more important or seem like you know more. The truth is there's not a doctor, there's not a scientist that knows